We've already mocked up the LS engine block and T56 transmission case into our 1969 Corvette. Now the V8 team needs to build a transmission tunnel to close the big hole they cut into the floor. The team starts by creating a wire frame using TIG rods for structure, being careful to incorporate all the necessary contours to clear the transmission and shifter mechanisms. Once the wire frame was made, it is draped in fiberglass matting and resin and would become the mold for the actual tunnel piece. As layers of fiberglass are added, the resin hardens and the tunnel mold takes shape. When completed, it is treated to bodywork techniques similar to a car's exterior, using body filler to fill gaps and refine the shape. The mold is sanded and shaped, then layered with blue tape and mold release. The process starts over to make the final piece, this time without the wire frame support. Fiberglass and resin is used to build layers, and when hardened, the tunnel is separated from the mold. Some additional trim work is done to the piece before it is finished. The tunnel is painted black, then bonded and riveted to the body of the Corvette. This process is similar to the way many of the Corvette's original panels were bonded and fastened together for a strong union. It matched the contours of the floor perfectly, and provided a strong upgrade to the cracked original tunnel and the needed clearance for the new transmission and shifter. Now that they know the mock-up engine and transmission will fit, the V8 team begins work on the new LS3 Chevrolet crate engine.
So an LS3 is a Gen 4 GM small block. It's basically the last LS motor that GM designed. It's 6.2 liters on stock trim, makes about 430 horsepower depending on what car it was put in. This one, in our case, is the 480 horse. So it's a GM Performance LS3 with a factory cam swap in it. They stick their, what they call the hot cam in it. Bumps the horsepower up about 50, the torque up another 30 foot-pounds, and gives it a little sort of a hot rod idle, so it doesn't idle perfectly smooth like a stock one. An LS3 is a great choice for a car like this. One, because the LS platform is tried and true, makes a lot of horsepower. It's relatively cost-effective for the horsepower. There's not a lot of things that you can buy with a warranty that make that type of power that you can daily drive and basically go to any parts store and get stuff for it if you need it. The motor technically is ready to run. It's everything from the throttle body down to the oil pan. Typically the oil pan that comes on a crate motor is from a late model car. It doesn't fit really well because of the way frames are designed in old cars compared to new cars. So one of the first things we wanted to change was to a Holley oil pan. Holley makes several versions of their oil pan to fit various swap situations. In this case, the standard oil pan for a typical small block swap fits just fine in this car. We also use the Holley accessory drive with some minor modifications because it mounts the accessories up high and to the sides, which actually puts it a little bit over the suspension and near the inner fenders.
All right, so do you think that this engine's going to go in the car with all the Holley brackets attached, or are we going to have to take this off, put it in there, and put it all back on?
Well, we're hoping it's going to go into the car because, well, we've used this stuff before, and one of the things we like about this is it puts everything up high. Because a lot of classic cars and street rods and stuff have real narrow frame rails, so you don't have a lot of room down below. The tricky thing on Corvettes is the upper control arms are in a kind of awkward spot compared to a lot of other cars, so hopefully we don't run into an issue with an upper control arm hitting the compressor or the alternator.
And then, are we going to try and wire any of this on the stand, or is this all just going along for the ride until it gets in?
So right now I'm still missing my injector harness, but basically what I've got going on here, all this is going to go with the motor into the car, and where the end is, this plugs into the ECM, and we got some various things got to plug into the rest of the car, some pigtails. Look under the car, I got pigtails dropped that are going to attach to all these, so kind of be a drop in, plug and play.
We hope.
We hope. The LS motor actually is not much different dimensionally than a Gen 1 small block. They typically fit in about the same place. The thing that makes a Corvette more difficult is the motor's farther back and farther down, which puts the control arms basically in the path of accessory drives. The other thing that we have to consider is heater hose routing because of where the heater hose ports typically are on an LS water pump. So what we had to do here, because of the clearance in the Corvette and where the control arms are and how low the motor sits, is we ended up having to get a smaller power steering pulley, which got us past the control arm. We had to flip the bolt around here. Hopefully, when we go to line this, we don't need a whole lot more caster than it's got. It does have a couple shims in here now, so not too concerned. The other thing is the heater hoses on a typical LS pump come out the side of the thermostat housing. Well, that's into the control arm on the passenger side, so John welded us a couple of AN fittings in, and that'll allow us to run hoses out of the pump in a different location. Now lastly, we put a straight thermostat housing on. Again, almost all LSs in a factory application have a thermostat housing that points off to the right, but we're in the control arm with that too. So all those minor modifications got everything to fit up here.
LS engines can use a variety of management systems to run, ranging from factory ECMs down to carburetors. We chose a system from Holley for ease of install and tuning flexibility.
So for this particular car, we opted to go with a Holley Dominator engine management system. Some of the reasons are the owner's not quite sure if this is all he's going to do to the car. He may have some future plans, power adders of some sort, and the Holley system is a lot more user-friendly for those things. Another thing is the Holley Dominator supports drive-by-wire, which Gen 4 LS motors are all drive-by-wire. So these things make it a lot easier for the long-term plan of the car. If the owner ever wants to change anything, it's a matter of maybe some rewiring and some retuning, but the capabilities are basically endless. The Holley stuff is basically open source. Anybody can download the software. Anybody who's competent in tuning can run the software. Even the owner of the car. Basically anybody with a laptop and a USB cable has the capability to work on the car, which opens up your possibilities and makes it easier for possibly remote tuning the car with somebody you know and trust, because you can email tunes back and forth without having special cables or licenses. The other big thing about the Holley system is it's self-tuning to an extent. You set some targets and the brunt of your driving is sorted out while you drive the car. Not to say that there's no effort in getting the drivability correct, but it takes a lot of the meat out of a custom tune on something.
A big part of any fuel injection swap is the fuel delivery system from tank to engine.
So the LS3 requires a high pressure fuel system. There's a few ways to go about it. In this case, we used a tanks kit for the car. So it's a brand new tank that looks stock, but has a fuel pump module built into it basically. So the tanks kit runs a Walbro 255 in-tank pump like a late model car. And up front we ran a mechanical regulator to get our fuel pressure at 58, which is what LSs are designed to run at. anytime you're upgrading the fuel system on an old car, especially to something that's going to handle fuel injection, you got to be careful of your venting the tank. Make sure that it's properly vented, because the pump does a few things. One, it sucks fuel out of the tank, possibly at a much higher rate than the mechanical pump ever could, which without proper venting can collapse the tank. Then you also want to use high quality connections, or fuel injection hose and proper clamps and fittings properly assembled, so that you don't end up with a leak under high pressure, spraying fuel somewhere under the car or a hot engine, because that's a fire hazard. The Corvette presents some challenges with rollover protection. Typically you want to put a rollover valve or something in the vent system, so that if the car does end up upside down, it doesn't leak fuel. Beyond safety, just drivability, a fuel tank sloshes, especially when it gets low. The tank's fuel tank is designed with a baffle system that keeps fuel around the sock on the pump, so that even when you're low on fuel, you're not going to go around a corner, start the fuel pump, and stall the engine, or hurt the fuel pump, or possibly hurt the engine when you're wide open and fuel slosh to the back and you run low. So one of the biggest problems with a fuel injection swap is that fuel pumps are sensitive pieces of equipment. They're designed to push fuel more than pull fuel, and they make a lot of heat. Keeping the fuel pump in the tank actually helps cool the pump, because for most of the time it's submerged, and even when it's not submerged, it's pulling fuel through it, which is cooling it. As soon as you run a pump dry, it starts to overheat quickly, which can damage it and make it fail pretty quickly. A lot of applications, there still aren't in-tank fuel pumps, so we see a lot of external fuel pumps, and what ends up happening is you get down below a quarter tank, the fuel doesn't get picked up properly because there's not a proper baffle, and then pump overheats, or the pump's just working too hard trying to pull fuel to wherever its location is, which ends up creating more heat and killing it. Plus, being outside of the tank, it's more subject to the environmental elements, the heat outside, road debris. So whenever possible, we like to do an in-tank pump of some sort, so that it's as close to OE quality as we can get.
Our Corvette project continues with more performance upgrades next time on V8 TV.
Like this show? Want more? Then head to WatchPTTV.com, the new 100% free PowerTube TV streaming network. Home of the best classic and new motorsports racing and build shows on the web.